Hey Steve, I'm going to quickly go through some of your games. I don't want to make the mistake of paying too close attention to what's going on in your play right now, because as you admitted yourself, you're having a lot of troubles with the very basic fundamentals of making enough workers. And if you don't make enough workers, then we end up analyzing a game where you don't have enough money by 10 minutes to get what a normal army would be built up of. So let's just, go pretty quick and point out the obvious things. So at this point you have, 17, 15 workers and a marine. I friended that guy who beat me on Metalopolis. Okay, neat. Yeah, anyway, you always want to start your orbital the second your Rax finishes. You never want to delay your orbital. It's not a big deal to delay it a little bit, but every 17 seconds that you delay it gives you an SCV, but costs you 25 minerals that you would have gotten more if you'd had the mule. So there you go. I want to take a look at where your camera is, because the most important thing when you're trying to improve your fundamentals is to just remember to almost the entire game your camera should be right on your base like this. This build is a little bit ridiculous. I don't know what you're thinking here. I think you're gonna do a Hellion drop, but it's not even a Blue Flame Hellion drop, just Hellion drop. I don't like screwing around with these complex strategies, because if you watch your camera, right now there's no workers building, and there's no workers building, and you're doing a Hellion drop, which means, okay, you're building a worker, you're building a marine, and now you gotta watch these Hellions. Watch these Hellions. Watch these Hellions. Watch the drop ship. Take a look at what's going on. Watching these Hellions. And so you're not building a worker. You're building one marine. You're not building really much at all. Your money is getting up to 800. You started some stuff. Going back to your base to look around. And now, while you're looking at your base, your Hellions died. And while you're looking at your base, your medevac is being killed. It's like, it's too much. It's too much. You shouldn't be worrying about Hellion drops. It's not a strategy that is gonna improve your fundamentals. It's like you gotta walk before you can run. Until you are really good at the building enough units, spending $3,500 on army by 10 minutes. I'm pausing it and unpausing it right here. 10 minutes. You spent $2,300. Now that's $1,000 less than you would have spent if you had really good macro. So it's gonna play in your favor to simply not do anything for the early part of the game until you're really good at always pausing at 10 minutes, looking at your workers and saying, aha, 40, and looking at your spending and saying, aha, 3,000. Until you can do that with every single replay of every game you ever play, don't look away from your base. Don't try to be clever. Don't try to Hellion drop. Don't try to get Banshees and Ravens and random high tier stuff. Just stick to Marines and Marauders and Medevacs, and don't look away from your base. So, production-wise, you're getting Cloak and some Banshees, and you haven't gotten your expansion up. One of the most important things in the lower leagues is income, right? I've already said that. You making enough SCVs, but the whole point of making enough SCVs is to make more money, and you can only mine off one base with 28 SCVs. So if you're going to make a bunch of SCVs and really capitalize on having good macro, you have to expand before the 8-minute mark, because at 8 minutes, if you have perfect macro, you're going to have 31 SCVs. Let's see how many you had. Income 23, so you should have had 31. He has 32, so he's doing okay. So with perfect macro, you would have max income on one base at this point. So if you don't already have a command center, then every SCV you produce after 8 minutes is doing nothing. And then at 18 minutes, when your main mine's out, it's even more important to have already expanded. I'm having trouble explaining what I want to say, but basically what I want to say is that you should always expand at around 6 minutes no matter what's going on. And if you can't expand at 6 minutes, you should just consider that game a loss, You shouldn't worry too much about it. You need to get a certain number of workers, a certain amount of army, and an expansion up, or everything else that happens in the game is not something you want to pay attention to. So let's pretend that your macro is perfect and you have a giant army and all that stuff, and just look at the less important stuff, like where your camera is focused and what you're building and what you're doing. So right now you're looking at your base, but you sent in your banshees into a bunch of cannons and got them killed, right? I don't think that was the right move. So now you just glance over and say, oh, what's attacking my banshees? And they're all dead. So that's the problem with making units like banshees, when you don't have the fundamentals down that allow you to macro without really having to think about it. If you have to spend all your attention and your focus trying to make sure that you macro well, then you don't have the attention left over to do tricky things like Hellion drops and banshees. So again, there was this big battle here in which I bet your army size. First off, you threw away those 4 banshees, so your army size is much smaller than it would have been. But even still, you have a big enough army to win this battle. Okay, you have 2,700 against his 3,000. So you're only a tiny bit behind on army. The problem is your army is over here. Yeah, you know, some of it is this Banshee here, and these 2 Hellions here, and these guys here, and these guys here. So your army isn't actually in the fight. And then the whole point of bunkers is to tank. When you have a bunch of guys standing near bunkers, they should be standing behind the bunkers, right here. They should be standing right here. You want your opponent to come up and hit the bunkers and hit the bunkers. And even if the bunkers die, it is much better for them to die than for you to not even let them take damage, because they have 800 hit points. The whole point is to spend $200 and get 800 hit points. Whereas with Marines, $200 would have been 400 hit points. You get twice as many hit points out of bunkers. So even empty bunkers are good as long as they're tanking. So now, instead, your bunkers die after your real damage units have already died. So, yeah, you want rally points on these things. You've got one now, and you want the rally point to be behind the bunkers, not in front of the bunkers. And if you're massing banshees, rally those up here too, because when the fight happens, you've got about 2 seconds to respond. And in most cases, you won't even be looking at the fight. So you'll be over here, a fight will start to happen, he'll start to fight, and then you'll click back over here, and now the fight's over. So you don't even get a chance to do anything. So positioning before the fight is much more important than what you plan to do when the fight starts. So keep your guys rallied behind your bunkers, and then if he comes up here with his crap, you've already got your whole army here in the correct position, and they'll do really good. So anyway, going into the rest of this game, here he comes again. All these cannons to you, anytime you see a big mass of cannons, that should make you think this is 300, 450, 600, $1,200 that he didn't spend on his army. That means your army is so much bigger than his, you can take a second expansion, a third base. So anytime you see a bunch of cannons, take a third base. So here comes the